At just 25 years old, I have made over $50,000 from content creation in the last year and a half. And recently, I started to notice something about YouTube that I think is going to completely change how all creators are going to approach content in 2026. Because right now, YouTube is making it 10 times easier to get views on your videos if you just follow what I'm going to talk about in this video. Now, I want to be careful with how I say this because I'm not trying to sit here and act like I'm some big-time engineer working inside of YouTube's headquarters. I'm definitely not. But when you spend years obsessing over content, testing what works, watching what scales, and paying attention to the patterns, you start to notice when something shifts. And for me, it feels like one of these moments are happening right now. Because for a long time on YouTube, a lot of creators were able to grow by finding what already worked, slightly rewarding it, slightly repackaging it, and basically posting their own version of the exact same video. I mean, even for me, because that's pretty much exactly how I got my foot in the door with YouTube just a few years ago. But with YouTube now implementing Google Gemini into the platform that scans every single millisecond of every video posted, channels that are just kind of copycats of one another are going to start to die off. And I'm not saying that YouTube is banning getting inspiration from other people's videos, because honestly, that is still one of the greatest ways to grow on the platform. I'm saying that if you make a video that talks about the exact same things that your inspiration video talks about, then why would YouTube recommend your video when they can just recommend that original video you took inspiration from? Because if you really zoom out on it all, it actually makes a lot of sense. Google owns YouTube, and right now Google is going all in on AI search, which means when people search for answers, Google's AI is increasingly pulling information from YouTube videos, not just traditional websites. In fact, multiple recent studies have found that YouTube is now the most cited domain inside of Google's AI overviews. So if Google is leaning on YouTube that heavily, then obviously YouTube has more reasons to reward videos that actually add something fresh, specific, and useful, and not videos that are just another recycled version of what already exists. Because if Google has 10 videos that are saying the exact same thing as one another, then does it really need an 11th? No, it doesn't. It would rather surface a video that actually contributes to something new. And I think that this is where a lot of creators are getting caught off guard because they still think that the game is mostly title, thumbnail, hook, maybe niche selection, and that's it. And don't get me wrong, those things still matter a ton. I'm not saying they don't. But I believe now that there's another layer to it all that matters way more than a lot of people realize. And that layer is whether the actual substance of your video feels replaceable. Because if your video sounds like a slightly rewarded version of the last 10 videos on the same topic, then why would YouTube want to push your version when you're not adding anything new? And that's really the big idea here. YouTube is getting much better at identifying whether your video brings real information gain, real context, or a real angle, versus whether it's just another pass of something the platform already has in abundance. And if that's all true, then that changes the strategy completely. Because now it's not enough for your content to just be good enough. Your content has to feel necessary on the platform, and it has to feel like it earns its place. Now, I think the easiest way to explain this is with a very big topic. Because let's say you want to make a video on a topic that already has thousands and thousands of videos made about it. Most creators hear that and assume that the solution is to avoid that topic entirely because it's just too saturated. But actually, I don't think that's the right takeaway. I think you can absolutely still make videos on huge, popular, highly searched topics. The problem arises, though, when you approach those topics in the exact same way everyone else does. Because then what happens? You end up with a title that sounds too familiar, a script that hits the exact same obvious points, and a conclusion that feels exactly like every other video in the category. And when your content is that predictable, it becomes interchangeable. It doesn't matter if your editing is a little cleaner, or your mic sounds a little better, or your thumbnail is slightly more polished. If the core value is still basically the same, then your content becomes easier to ignore. But if you take that same broad topic and come at it from a different angle that most people haven't really focused on, now you're not just adding another video to the pile. You're carving out your own lane. And that is exactly where I think a lot of creators are going to win over the next year. Not by abandoning proven topics, but by attacking them from a fresher, more specific angle that actually creates curiosity. And I also think that this is exactly why some creators are so frustrated right now, because a lot of them are still making content that would have worked a year ago, but just doesn't really work today. It's not necessarily bad content. It's not even always lazy. It's just too familiar. It's too close to what already exists. And when that happens, I think people automatically jump to the idea that they're shadow banned, or the algorithm is broken, or YouTube is against them personally. And sometimes, sure, weird things do happen, but a lot of the time, I think the harder truth is just that their content isn't different enough. Because think about how much easier it now is to mass-produce decent-looking content. You could use AI to help brainstorm, AI to help script, AI voices, AI visuals, templates, auto captions, everything really. It has never been easier to make content that looks acceptable on the surface. But that also means acceptable content is now worth less. If everyone can produce content at a decent scale, then decent content just stops being special. And that means that the creators who are going to win are going to be the ones who are making content that it doesn't feel like it's made from a machine. Now, another part of this that I think matters a lot is how clearly YouTube can understand what your video is actually about. Because I think a lot of creators are still underestimating this. They think the title does all the work, or the description, or the tags. But I think the specific wording inside your video matters way more than people realize. In other words, if your title promises one thing, but your script is vague, broad, and dances around the actual subject too much, that's probably hurting you more now than it ever used to. And I've seen this a lot when creators try way too hard to sound clever. They use vague phrases, they hint at things instead of naming them, and they speak in a super broad way because they think it sounds more polished or more cinematic. But sometimes the smartest thing that you can actually do is be clearer and more direct. Say the actual names, say the exact concepts, hit the real terms. To reinforce the real topic, because the more clear your content is, the easier it is to connect that to the right viewers, and the easier it is for that video to build authority inside of a topic. And no, I'm not saying that every script needs to sound robotic or stuffed with keywords. That would just be stupid. I'm saying that clarity matters more than cleverness. If cleverness is making the content harder to categorize, because if YouTube is trying to understand your video at a deeper level, then being specific about it is a very big advantage. Now, this is also where I want to make an important distinction with AI, because I know the second people hear this kind of conversation, they immediately think, okay, so AI is dead. That's not what I'm saying at all. I'm definitely not anti-AI, because AI is a great tool and can be incredibly useful. It can help with brainstorming, research, direction, outlining, workflow, and a bunch of other things. The issue is not whether AI touched the process. The issue is whether the final content feels empty, generic, and mass-produced. That is the real difference. If you use AI to move faster, but the final video still has your brain in it, your structure in it, and real creative choices in it, that's one thing. But if the script sounds like it was generated from the same formula as 1,000 other scripts, the visuals look like filler, the narration has no soul, and the whole channel feels like a content factory, then yeah, I do think that type of content is going to have a much harder time long term. Maybe not because YouTube publicly says it, but because the platform has every reason to value content that feels more useful, more original, and more trustworthy. And honestly, that should be good news if you're a real creator. Because if I'm right, then this shift actually benefits the people who are willing to think deeper. It benefits the people who are willing to bring a real angle to the table. It benefits the people who understand that the goal is not to just upload more content, but to upload content that's actually going to resonate with your audience. Because that's what I think a lot of creators don't fully understand. The goal is to not just make content that functions. It's to make content that has a reason to exist. There is a huge difference between the two. Functional content can get views for a while, but content with a reason to exist is what builds channels that will actually last. And the more the platform gets flooded with mass-produced content, the more that difference matters. So if your content has been flatlining lately, I wouldn't automatically jump to the idea that YouTube just hates your channel. Now, I would first ask a harder question. Is my content too easy to replace? Am I covering the topic in the same way as everyone else? Is my content giving the platform a fresh angle or just another duplicate? Because if the answer to those questions is ugly, then that's probably where the real problem is. Going forward, the creators who win are going to be the ones who ask better questions before they even make the video. Not just will this get views, but why does my version deserve views? And not just can I make this video, but more so, can I make this in a way that doesn't feel interchangeable? So overall, I don't think the old game of YouTube is completely dead. I don't think that the title and thumbnails suddenly don't matter. But what I do think is that the standard is changing. I do think that YouTube is becoming less rewarding for content that merely just exists, and more rewarding for content that actually contributes something. And if it's all true, then this is one of the most important shifts that creators need to understand right now. And yeah, that's pretty much everything I have for today's video. If you want to leave a comment down below explaining the type of videos that you make or the specific niche that you're in, I'll try my best to respond to all you guys and let you know if your channel is good or if it needs some tweaks. Also, if you enjoyed the video, I'd really appreciate it if you subscribed. But yeah, that's all for today's video, and I'll see you guys in the next.